Welcome to the shroud-drenched gloomy paradise of the wrecked ship. I am so pleased to welcome you to my beautiful home. Come and enjoy an artificial dreadful land to which I've added many other spooky ghosts, a spectacular group of walking robots, and devoid of all forms of electrical power. This and more await you on the wrecked ship, so come on down and relax and allow me to spook all of your worries away. Oh no, it's Samus! Time for me to ghost fade away now. Ooh.
Ever since its release on the Super Nintendo back on 1994, Super Metroid has always been considered to be one of the greatest and most influential games in history, for the way it helped redefine how to create an open-ended and exploration-driven experience. This entry in the series tasks players with re-exploring the depths of the hostile planet Ceres, in order to recover a stolen baby Metroid that in the wrong hands could spell doom for the universe, while at the same time tracking down a resurgent group of space pirates who have once again taken control of the planet. One of the game's defining features is exploring the many different sections of this large and menacing planet, that house a variety of different environments and wildlife in an effort to collect power-ups that will help you traverse into new rooms and locations that will hopefully house one of the 4 key bosses that you need to defeat in order to enter the depths of Turian. But from all the areas in this game, there's one in particular that has raised a lot of curiosity amongst players with its ominous setting, otherworldly environment, and many secrets to which we don't seem to have clear answers to this day. That location being the infamous wrecked ship. This specific location can be found on a lake in Criteria, the surface level of planet Ceres, nearby the place where Samus originally lands her ship. And typically, the game requires you to already own the grapple beam in order to access it in the way that it was intended by the developers, thus making it a place that you could only really search halfway through your journey. Once inside, players will immediately get a bigger sense of dread when compared to the other areas of the game. Most of the ship is completely empty, devoid of any life. The music plays a much more somber and mysterious tone that quickly fills in the air, and the lack of power means that neither the save stations or map rooms can be used in here. A death in this vessel would mean that players will most likely have to redo all the progress they just lost, assuming they didn't save frequently before coming aboard this desolate place. This is one of the defining characteristics that makes this location stand out so much, with how it applies a sense of fear and dread onto its players without having something in particularly designed to scare them inside the ship. And the only way to restore power is by defeating one of the main 4 bosses that resides in this area, which is the ghostly Phantoon, which serves as an incentive for you to go inside the ship and try to uncover any secret locations it might have. But the question that still remains in the back of the minds of many fans is, what exactly happened to the wrecked ship and where did it originally come from? This enigma has created a lot of rumors within the Metroid community, the most popular being that this place is the remains of the space pirate mothership from Metroid Zero Mission after its self-destruction, which was initiated by the defeat of Mecha Ridley. And this seems to be a rather plausible theory, considering that the ship was destroyed on the surface level of Criteria, and that both ships house work robots that look very similar in design. The ghostly remains seen on the wrecked ship, known as Coverns, might be the remains of the original space pirate crew, with Phantoon being a bioweapon they kept aboard the ship in secret, and the fact that this game takes place before Super Metroid will help explain why it wasn't seen in the original NES game. For the longest time, this theory seemed to be the closest we're going to get to an actual story of the derelict vessel, especially seeing how it neatly tied together the events of Metroid Zero Mission with those from the Super Nintendo game. But sadly, soon after the release of the NES remake, the game's director Yoshio Sakamoto, who also directed the other 2D games in the series, was quick to dismiss this theory by stating that the space pirate mothership and the one seen in Super Metroid are completely different spacecrafts. In fact, something that may come as a surprise to some diehard fans is that you can actually find some of the remains of the wrecked ship in the Chosoria area of Zero Mission. Granted, These are two small rooms that are easily dismissible at first glance, but they do resemble the map from Super Metroid in many ways that ties the locations of both games together. So if this is the case, the question still remains, where exactly did the wrecked ship come from? Well, surprisingly enough, the lore of this location runs much deeper than what you might initially expect. It turns out that what we would come to know as the abandoned wreckage once used to be a spaceship belonging to none other than the advanced Chozo, that found itself crashing on the surface of planet Ceres, and it can be speculated that this was when the species first decided to settle down on this planet. Those who managed to survive quickly began building a large temple around their crash site and expanded all over the top of the surface, creating the area that we would later know as Chozodia. And using the temple as their central home base, the Chozo continued to explore the planet's caverns and began construction of some new bases of operations and forms of technology. However, unknown to the owners of the spacecraft, during their travels they will find themselves with an unwanted passenger, for the multi-dimensional ghost known as Phantoon had invaded their vessel during their space travels, but would lie dormant up until the events of Super Metroid. Now, who exactly is Phantoon, where did he come from, and was he the one responsible for crashing the ship in the first place? Well, those are topics that I think are best left for another video. The Chozo will still utilize the wrecked ship as their base of operations until they decided to build another one much deep inside the planet's caves, where they could still study the native life forms a lot easier and construct a new supercomputer in order to aid them in an area that will be called Turian. It's not until later on where the space pirates will ultimately invade the planet, since the supercomputer the Chozo had built, Mother Brain, went rogue and betrayed them by deciding to join forces with the pirates in order to conquer the galaxy. At this time, the pirates began excavating the temples found in Chozodia, as they gathered the weapons made by the advanced race, and this ultimately led to the Chozo fleeing from Ceres as seen in the Metroid manga, and ultimately kickstarted the events of the first Metroid game on the NES. And so, the reason why you couldn't explore the wrecked ship on Zero Mission is because at that point, the majority of the ship was still buried under the temples of Chozodia. It was only uncovered later by the space pirates when they returned to rebuild their base of operations on Ceres after the destruction of Planet Phase on Metroid Prime 3, which ruined their plans of using the Phazon to conquer the galaxy. And thus only now could players finally explore the remains of the mysterious ship, causing the reawakening of the ghostly Phantoon in the process as they fought the space pirate forces once again on planet Ceres, and uncover what in reality was once an ancient ship of the mystifying Chozo. But now that we know the true nature of this area and of the people who once inhabited it, the real question to be asked is, where did the Chozo really come from? What led them to crash onto this planet? And what was their original destination? We may never know the answers to these questions, but one thing will always remain for certain. Wherever the Chozos may find themselves going in their travels through space, one bad thing or another will end up creeping its way into the spotlight, trying to threaten with the destruction of the galaxy as we know it.
Yellow hoo hoo.